Welcome back. You are with Newsday. You've been watching our coverage today of the state dinner. We just heard a bit earlier in the bulletin an address by the US President Joe Biden and then the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, full of praise for each other and the close bond between our two nations. Let's bring in now, live from Washington, DC, Gordon Flake. He's the CEO of the Perth USAsia Centre. Gordon, what a night. It really looks like your home country has turned it on for our Prime Minister.
Well, they certainly have. I don't know that the United States can compete with the British for pomp and circumstance, but certainly compared to us in Australia, they do ceremony very well. This is only the first official state visit that President Biden has hosted in his time as president. And this morning I had a chance to attend the official welcome ceremony on the South Lawn of the White House. There's an awful lot of ceremony, an awful lot of symbolism. And the fact that other than India and France and South Korea, Australia is the only international leader that's been afforded this honor, the full 19-gun salute and the state dinner tonight, as well as a full week of activities, it does indicate the closeness of the relationship and the priority that the United States places upon Australia.
And when we look at that closeness, we heard around half an hour ago the Prime Minister in his address at the state dinner said that he believes the US and Australia are closer now than at any point in history after this trip. How so? What can the Prime Minister point to in terms of why this trip has been so successful?
Well, it's not that we were not close in the past. It's just that with every passing day, it seems that there are more and more areas on which we need to collaborate. And so obviously the ongoing crisis in the Middle East, continued concern about Ukraine, challenges in our own region. But if you just look at one thing that probably didn't get as much attention as it should have, there's a lot of focus on the Microsoft $5 billion. But the fact that the U.S. and Australia are pledging to work together, not just on climate change, but more importantly for us in Australia, working together to make sure that we build these critical mineral or rare earths or supply chains. The fact that Australia has announced another $2 billion for a critical minerals facility, that the U.S. and Australia are working together on a critical minerals task force, it just means that you can look at the full spectrum, everything from AUKUS and security to economics and trade to international relations. There's hardly an area in global policy where Australia and the U.S. are not working together. The other thing that the Prime Minister said this morning at the White House welcome ceremony is not just that it's the best relationship ever, it's probably the most important the relationship's ever been in face of the challenges that we're both facing.
And when we look at some of those challenges, when we look at that joint news conference that was held between our two leaders a bit earlier in the day, it was interesting to hear Joe Biden using that opportunity to warn about China and its trustworthiness. And also, particularly, he stressed that he was concerned about China's Navy's activities happening close to the Philippines. The President used some pretty strong language there, didn't he, saying the US commitment to the Philippines is ironclad. When we look at the various flashpoints around the world, what did you read into the US President's decision to raise that one while he was standing alongside our Prime Minister?
So there's a narrative among some in Australia that the U.S. is somehow opposed to our Prime Minister going to China next month. At the same time, the U.S. has actually been emphasizing how they welcome that and how the U.S. President looks to comparing notes with our Prime Minister after his visit there. At the same time, in a couple of weeks, the United States is preparing to host the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Washington, D.C., and hoping to host Chinese President Xi Jinping at the APEC meetings in San Francisco. So there really is a close coordination on China, not the discord that some might seek. When it comes to the Philippines, Australia has a very close security relationship with the Philippines. And if you look carefully at statements coming out of Canberra and out of our own Prime Minister, there's not a lot of daylight between what's happening in Washington and what's happening in Canberra. We're all concerned about the rules of the road, or in this case, the rules of the ocean, and ensuring that we do not see another conflagration in the Indo-Pacific when we've got so much to deal with in Ukraine and in the Middle East right now.
And Gordon, just finally before you go, we see that there's a House Speaker finally there in the US has been elected. What do we need to know about Mike Johnson? What does his election tell us more broadly about the political landscape there in Washington at the moment?
Well, after 3 weeks of failed attempts, I'm sure there's a sense of relief on the part of the Republican Party to finally have a speaker and finally at least being able to move the wheels of government forward. I think that relief might be short-lived because there's some real challenges coming up. Number one, they had managed to keep the government open for just 45 days. They used up half of that period of time in finding a new speaker. So now there's just over 3 weeks left before they're going to have to pass a bill to get the government moving forward. There's also the key concerns about the Ukraine funding. And from an Australian perspective, there are four key pieces of legislation that are essential to implement the AUKUS agreement that need to be moved forward this year. What remains to be seen is whether or not this new speaker is inclined to do so. He comes from a very conservative wing of the party. He was not well known. He's not well vetted. Every hour now, it seems to be there's some past statements coming out. His role in the January 6th process, his role in trying to overturn the election, and his strong opposition to many of the things I just listed in terms of funding for Ukraine, a new budget going forward. So I think the United States has taken an important step forward in terms of having a speaker. The challenges remain, and we're going to see an awful lot in the coming weeks.
Gordon Flake, appreciate you staying up late there in Washington for us after what has no doubt been a very long day as that tour has continued, our Prime Minister in town. Appreciate your analysis. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.